In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen.
So, obviously throughout Paschal week, we're focusing on the prophecies and the fulfillment of those prophecies. I have a quick story where a couple of years ago, as many of you know, I'm based primarily in the Middle East, and I was asked by my company to go see, the former Attorney General of Israel. So went there, spent some time with this person along with some colleagues, and teasing him one day, I said, "Hey, look, I'm also part of the blessed people. I'm also God's people." He's like, "Come on." I said, No. In the Bible it says, in your Torah it says, "Blessed is Egypt, my people." He goes, "Okay." And it says, "Out of Egypt I called my son." And as we chatted, I said, "What does that mean?" And he goes, "You know what?" And again, remember, this is the Attorney General. It's not some uneducated fellow. And he's like, "I don't know. I don't really understand what." There are many verses that we don't really know what they mean. And it reminded me of how fortunate we are during Paschal week that we focus on the Old Testament. Often throughout the year, we're focused on the Pauline and the Catholic epistles and Acts and the saints, the Synaxarion and the Gospel, and a little bit of Psalms. But it's so exciting this week. We get to connect it all. We get to see these prophecies and the fulfillment. And it's one after another, and you say, well, there's too many coincidences that this is not the Christ that was being prophesied about. In any event, I really am fortunate to be here. As you know, in the Middle East, there is obviously Iran issues. Our churches in Dubai are closed. So I think it's just a reminder to all of us that sometimes we forget how fortunate we are to be here, where we can come to a church, it's open, and the fact that, I know Abuna and many others are often working with folks in other parts of the world where they're not even allowed to be Christian. They are begging, literally begging, to find out, hey, can you allow me to attend one of your churches somewhere? Because they so desperately are so keen to be baptized and to become part of our church. And so just a reminder to us that we're very fortunate, so don't miss out on Holy Week, and just know that there's so many out there who wish they were here with us. And I'm very grateful, and know that I'm not worthy. I'm often sitting in Dubai watching this presentation by you folks, because it's such a blessing, because every time I attend the men's group and watch these podcasts, I don't know if they're called podcasts, whatever they are, I learn so much more. So I feel a bit silly being here, but thank you again for the opportunity. In any event, so prior to Palm Sunday, as we follow the life of Christ throughout our period of Lent, Christ is doing one miracle after another. He's healing the sick, he's healing the blind, he's feeding, people. So not very surprisingly, that sounds like a great leader, People want to make him king. Who wouldn't want, if we had a leader who showed up here and said, suddenly we got free health care, free food, it was high quality, and we ate as much as we wanted, and had 12 baskets left over, you'd say, that guy should be our leader. And so, not surprisingly, they were very keen on following him. And obviously, it was a little confusing. Christ, despite making many attempts to be clear that this is not what I'm here for. I'm here for something much more important. I'm here for your souls. I'm here for a much higher calling. They still, and let's be honest, many of us in our prayers and the type of prayers we say, ask about not our salvation, not about how can I be closer to you, Christ, but God, I could use X, I could use Y, I really need more help with this. And I think just a reminder to us that, that's not what Pascha is about. It's not what Christ came for, although he loves us so much as our Father that he wants to help us in every way. So, at least in the readings for me, and there's probably many more, but the things I got out of it were two themes. One was mentioned by Abuna Johanna yesterday, that don't despair, no giving up. So this, no matter how bad we are, no matter how many mistakes we've made, no matter what we've done that we think is just unforgivable, don't give up. And the second one was God's way, not my way. And I think that's the other challenge that many of us have, particularly me, is that is saying, hey, look, God, you know, I pray in the Lord's Prayer multiple times a day for your will, but can you try to make it align with my will and what I want? And remembering that, no, I need to work constantly towards, getting to God's will and know that He knows better than me. And a number of the readings touch on that. So one was, Mike read in the first hour, it was a bit extreme, right? I mean, Christ is saying, I have the power to lay down my life, and I have the power to take it again. I mean, it reminded me of a silly story, where you have a story of Babe Ruth, World Series, and he's like, I'm going to hit the baseball right over there. And people are like, this is nuts. You're telling us where you're going to hit the ball. And sure enough, that's what Christ does. And it's not hitting the ball a certain direction. It's like, I will decide when I take my life, and I will take it back when I'm ready. And I've already told you it's going to be after 3 days, and you will see the sign of Jonah and so forth. So, of course, folks are very upset. This is Christ, despite all the things He had done, people are not getting upset. You're not talking about dying, living. Some said, is He a demon? And others said, well, He can't be. He's healing the blind. He's doing all these things. Fast forward in our readings, in Mark 14, it's interesting that, there is this dinner at Simon the leper's house. And as Mike pointed out the first night, sometimes when they make a specific reference to someone or names, it's because the folks in that community knew exactly who that was. And the fact that he's Simon the leper, a little bit of research, there's some belief at least that he is one of the lepers that Jesus actually had healed. And so he's now at this dinner at his home. And as we know from the story that in the gospel that a woman comes in, she's considered a sinful woman. She brings in this, flask of spikenard, and apparently it's very expensive perfume of some type, and breaks it and pours it over his head. And what's the reaction? It's not, wow, how beautiful. The reaction is, what are you doing? You've wasted, so much. How the value of this is ridiculous. What are you doing? And then, I can almost wonder that Christ looking at some of them and saying, oh, I mean, it's wasted because it could have gone to the poor. And the reaction is, Christ reminds me, hey, look, I'm not here with you much longer. She's getting me ready for my death. And look, if you are concerned, we can always do more for the poor. And one of the many things I love about this church is all our service that we do, and that we are reminded that we have these opportunities, and we should obviously be taking them. And it's wonderful when we hear that, that Christ reminds us that wherever we hear this gospel preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial to her. I can't remember. What's her name again? Does anyone know what her name is? Yeah, so I think one person said Mary. So there's another story with Mary, the sister of Lazarus, but that's actually a different story. So she is so important, and she's to be remembered, but it also reminds me of, the greatest of all men born of women, what Christ says about John. And what happens with John? What makes him one of the things that's so special? He says, hey, look, I must decrease, he must increase. And this particular woman, what an even greater example, I don't want to say the word greater, what an amazing example she is, that we don't even know her name. So I'm almost wondering that the folks, as they're writing the story, should look, I don't want any recognition. I want the focus on Christ. I want the focus on Him. I don't want any focus on me. I don't want to be remembered. I want Christ to be remembered. And for us to always be thinking, what can I be doing so that Christ is remembered? And I know it's challenging, and we're going to get into this in a minute. So he's told she didn't waste money. She did a wonderful thing. It's okay, fine. No, what's fascinating to me is Judas, right after that, he leaves and he goes to the chief priests to betray him to them. So they are saying, look, we've got to find Jesus. We want to find him at a time where there's not a big crowd. We need to do it quietly. We know that if we grab him when there's a lot of people around, there may be a riot. You know, he has done a number of things and is very popular amongst certain folks. And so they really needed someone like a Judas to help them identify and find him when he's in a quiet place. And Judas does this. Now, what's fascinating, I did a little chat GPT or Claude research. We know he gets 30 pieces of silver or shekels, and the value of what she had poured on him was 300 dinar. And so I asked ChatGPT, so what is that in dollars? You know, what's the equivalent in US dollars today? And they said, okay, you know, what she did was about $60,000. What he had taken was about 18, and the price he got was, we often say is for a slave. It's actually for a slave that's been gored by an oxen. So like a very low price, you know, it's not even like a fully healthy one. And look, of course, you know, even if he had betrayed Christ for $1 billion, so it's not necessarily the amount, but a reminder to us what happened. And so it makes me think, at least, did he really betray him for the money? And I know that a number of preaching says he does. I think it was much more than that. I think it was, there's a lot of pride in there. And we can see, and pride we know is a big enemy for many of us. And that he has this sinful woman and being praised, and he is not of small stature. He must have been somewhat important. The fact that he is the disciple who is collecting the money and trusted with the money. And for me, I'm always fascinated that, well, at some point, you got Matthew the tax collector to be one of your disciples. I would have been like, hey, look, thank you for your service. There's a guy who's trusted by the Roman Empire to collect money. He's really good at this. His math skills are off the charts. I think Matthew should take this over. But obviously, he was so respected that he continued in this position, which again I find fascinating. And when we think about him, wasn't he there when he fed the 5,000? Yes. Wasn't he there going 2 by 2 and healing the sick, the dead, you know, on and on, all of the miracles we read about? Yes. And is he a bad guy? Like look at, you know, the saints we have around us. You know, was he like, you know, I mean, Saint David who committed adultery and had, you know, Bathsheba's husband killed? Was he like, you know, Moses who killed an Egyptian, which is probably the worst crime of all? Well, you know, was he like, you know, Saint Moses the Strong, who we know was a robber and, you know, likely had killed folks as a member of a gang? On and on, and let alone the stories of Saint Mary of Egypt and her level of sinfulness, and a reminder that what's the difference? And so I started thinking a little bit about Peter, and saying, Peter was kind of a good guy, but not, right? I mean, he denied Christ 3 times before the rooster crowed, and we, you know, as you know, in the church, we when we talk about Judas, we normally, the deacons, they are walking counterclockwise, right? But at this point, we walk clockwise because we're showing Judas went with the world. He wanted to go with the world. We talk about, and often in the services, we use agios, agios, agios. And I remember one time asking one of the deacons, what does that mean actually? And they told me, yeah, worthy or holy. At some point, looked into it a little bit more, and in fact, what was really interesting about this is that there's the word geo. So there's a geo, like to say, the word geo kind of means world or earth. When you put an A in front of something, it means against it. So there's typical. You put an A in front of typical, it's atypical, not typical. Geo, worldly. Agios, against the world. Against the world is how we become more worthy, how we become more holy. is by not just going along with the world. And then now going into Peter, very quickly that, again, did Peter ask lots of questions, some of them silly? Yes. I was struggling to find the kind of questions Judas was asking during this period, reflecting the Bible. I mean, Peter, who we love so much, asked lots of questions and did things that were like, oh my goodness, Peter, you went a little too far. But Judas doesn't seem very silly at all. It does not seem to be asking silly questions or saying silly things. But, you know, when something bad happened, when he made this, mistake, and look, I mean, this is all theories, of course, now, but I almost have to wonder if he was like, look, Jesus, you're not doing the miracles. You're supposed to be the king of Israel. I almost wonder sometimes, did he really believe that Jesus was going to be crucified on the cross like a thief? Did he think like, well, he's not doing any miracles right now, but maybe if we push him into this situation, he will, become the king that he's supposed to be? Again, where this is all wondering, what is going through Judas's head that he would betray Christ for such a small amount, in comparison to what he thought was and what he had seen Christ do. And again, a reminder to me as God saying, do it my way, and Judas at some point saying, you know what, Jesus, you're very holy, you're great. I'm pretty smart though. I have another way. I have a better way. I'm going to show you a better way. And for many of us, isn't that true that, we're often trying to say, well, and look, we even talk about it, throughout church, whether in our churches, that, hey, is the bread and the wine really the body and blood? A lot of our brothers and sisters in various other churches say, come on, it's just a symbol, don't be silly. Do I have to really confess to a priest? I can just go straight to God and do the following, and on. There's lots of times where I think we're very tempted to do it our way and say, I don't know what the original church did. I don't know what the Desert Fathers say. I'm very smart, and I know I can kind of figure this out. I can read the Bible for myself, and I can kind of do it God's way, but in a way that makes sense to me. It's dangerous. It's very dangerous. And then just again on Peter, quickly, that there's a fellow that Abuna actually introduced me to in the Middle East. We were chatting the other day, and we're chatting about the difference between Peter and Judas, and for somehow we started coming up discussing grit. I don't know to what extent you guys are familiar with the term grit, but there is a famous professor out in Philadelphia who talks about, hey, look, successful people in various professions are not necessarily the smartest or the hardest working. They are the folks with grit. So what does grit mean? And grit is essentially a combination of passion and perseverance. And what is passion? Consistency, often over a period of time. And what's perseverance? Continuing to work hard even when things are difficult or discouraging. So Peter had that grit. He asked the questions. He asked some silly questions, but he made mistakes, but he persevered. He fell. And I know one of the men's groups, someone was telling me that they went to the monastery, St. Anthony, and they were speaking, I think, to one of the monks. And they're kind of like, well, what do you do here? And they mentioned, I thought it was quite interesting, saying, I get up, I fall. I get up, I fall. So in other words, I try, I make a mistake, I get up again. For Judas, he fell, and he thought, there's no getting up. While we are taught, this grit. And so it's fascinating to me that a concept that we know as Christians, the world sometimes takes and tries to use different words and say, this is how we can be successful. We know that even with Alcoholics Anonymous, it's often based on Christian concepts. And there's many other examples where things that work in the world are based on Christian teachings, but they want to take the Christ out of it. So I find that fascinating. So I just want to also just touch on some of the readings for this morning, two of them very quickly. So St. Moses, two of them. One was in Exodus 17 in the first hour. They talked about that, the Israelites had left Egypt. They're out there. They're very thirsty. They're very miserable. They're threatening at some point to stone Moses. And they're upset. And they're saying, there's no water here. What have you done? Moses goes, prays, speaks to God, and God tells him, hey, look, I want you to take these elders. You're going to go to this particular rock, and you're going to hit it in a certain way, and water is going to come out. Great. So he did what God said, and sure enough, a miracle happened. He hit the rock, and water came out. I'm going to skip some of the readings from the morning, but then you go to Numbers, and what happens there is quite different. Similar, but different. Again, they're in the desert. They're thirsty. They're angry with Moses. Him and Aaron go and pray, and God tells them, hey, look, go to this particular rock, and what he says to him is, speak to the rock, and it will give water. So he gives him very specific instructions, speak to the rock. What does Moses do instead? Even worse is that he tells the people, must we, as in Aaron and him, must we bring water out of the rock? I guess they're looking at him like, okay, do it. So then he strikes the rock twice, and water does come out. God is not amused. And tells them, look, yes, did it work? Did the water come out? It did. But he said, and this is St. Moses, right? You don't get to go to the promised land. You've now, taken some. Now, does that mean that Moses didn't go to heaven? No, we know that he was in the transfiguration, he's holy, etc. But there was a punishment. So a reminder to, if this could be Moses and trying to take credit for God's power, I need to be very careful and say, look, let me give glory to God, let me give power to God, let me remember that everything he's given me, he's given me. And again, I don't know why it struck me for the first time today or this week that when I say the Lord's Prayer, that I say, that we say, give us this day our daily bread. I just sort of thinking about it and said, give me? Don't you mean help me get daily bread? You're going to support me so that I can support my family? No, God's very clear. And we're very clear in church that, no, we are getting this from God. I'm not getting it, and God not giving me 15 support. And some of the verses we read earlier where he said, hey, look, I tried so hard to show you where I didn't put rain on this city, then I did this, I did the following. When are you going to wake up and realize your source of power is me? So I think we can all decide, hey, am I going to give God the credit, or am I going to try to take the credit? Am I going to be more like, the so-called sinful woman who is, I think we should call her the super holy woman, who doesn't even want to take enough credit that we remember her name. And the last thing I was going to read from this morning, Sirach 2:10. Consider the generations and who trust in the Lord and was put to shame, or whenever perceived in the fear of the Lord. And whoever forsaken, whoever called upon him was not overlooked. So if we put our faith in God, we're assured we're not going to be overlooked. We'll not be forgotten. And I think for us, all of us have examples where we try to do things our way, and we're like, the plan was perfect, and it didn't work out. And then other times we're like, look, God, I'm just going to give it to you. The situation feels hopeless to me, but I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to trust in you, and miracles happen. So, just keep remembering that as we go through Holy Week, we go into the Holy 50, that, keep giving it to God, keep remembering those two themes. God is the one in power, even though, like I said, as we say, thine is the power and the blessing and the glory. I always sometimes wonder if someone came off the street and saw this guy on the cross and, a crown of thorns, like, who are you talking about? But we know that the power and the fact that, in the liturgy, the last thing I say is, I'm always amazed in liturgy. We talk about that. How did Christ actually, the beautiful picture we have of Christ entering Hades and getting everyone out? We say that Christ entered Hades through what? The cross. So what was meant for torture, what was meant for embarrassment, what was meant for ridicule, Christ used that to actually enter Hades and free everyone. Amen.